Ask Reddit. What's the dumbest thing you've ever cried over? Part 2. I cried when I was around 10 years old because I couldn't choose if I wanted to watch episode 5 or 6 of Star Wars. When I was 6 years old, I had a nightmare that I killed my mom with a ping pong ball and went into an absurd amount of debt because of it. Woke up and cried the entire night even when she was holding me. I was on a strict diet for a bikini competition. A Cheerios commercial came on with a mother and daughter eating together. The daughter asked the mother if she ever ate Cheerios with her mom, the little girl's deceased grandmother. The mother told the daughter that she did. The little girl asked if it was kinda like they were all eating Cheerios together. Cried like a baby. So I actually looked this one up and yeah, it definitely gets the waterworks going.
Mom, did Nana ever give you Cheerios when you were a little kid?
Yeah, she did.
Were Cheerios the same back then?
Cheerios has pretty much been the same forever.
So when we have Cheerios, it's kind of like we're having breakfast with Nana.
Yeah.
It's a little boy with his mom, not a girl, but still, it's an absolutely heart-wrenching commercial. Although, maybe the grandmother is not even necessarily dead, maybe she just lives on the other side of the country or in another country. That's a little comforting to think about, right? Right? His name was Cole. In all seriousness, when I was 4, a classmate told me bananas were gross when I was about to eat one before recess, and I bawled my eyes out. When I was on my first flight, I cried when we went through the clouds. I thought the clouds were solid, and we would get out of the airplane and play and bounce on them like a trampoline. I was absolutely crushed. I also cried when I learned that all the big buildings in the city are just office buildings. I was imagining them being filled with big slides and whatever other magical things would be inside such a big building. Godzilla 1985. I thought he was dead for real for true and wasn't coming back. I had this toothbrush when I was young. This toothbrush had been given to me by my dentist, who was very nice and gave me sugar-free candy. I had this toothbrush for a while, and it was green, my favorite color. I had given this toothbrush a name, calling it Toothy, and gave it its own personality, a wisecracking New Yorker. In my defense, I was watching a lot of Looney Tunes at the time. My bathroom sink at the time had an empty area underneath it, really small, no more than an inch or so of space. The sink was bolted to the wall, so there was no moving it. One day after brushing, I dropped it and then kicked it underneath the sink. Time stood still, as thick as the toothpaste that was probably still on the brush. I tried to get him back. I really did. It felt like hours until I finally gave up, and when I did, I burst into tears. After crying for a bit, I began constructing a memorial out of Lego blocks, spelling his name. Still feel kinda bad about it. That one time in Adventure Time that Princess Bubblegum told a boy Cookie he couldn't be a princess, so he jumped off a cliff.
You know what? It's funny. You just sort of remind me of a mailman I used to know. I do? Yep. Princess!
I once cried over the song Thriller. This stems from my dad trolling me mostly. He'd known I was freaked out by zombies, so he decided to troll me by playing Thriller 24/7 for several months. As a result, the fear had only grown. I then go a while without hearing it, and it suddenly pops up and I'm having a minor freakout due to this thing I'm terrified by. I was a weak 7-year-old, but still, I blame my dad for using my fear for one of his sick jokes. I know I generally drew a pretty good number in the parent lottery, but I wish my dad would learn some social awareness and maybe not do things like play off what people are scared of to mess with them. I went on a family trip to Walt Disney World in 1997, and we went to a Beetlejuice show in the park. I was disappointed because I thought that it would be a Kiss concert. Kiss was all the rage because of their reunion tour in 1996 and 1997, so I started crying when I realized it wasn't a Kiss concert. I didn't even like their music at the time. I just wanted to see this cool thing everyone was talking about. That I couldn't play Grand Theft Auto when I was younger because it was rated M for mature. I thought that the game would be forever lost in the past and I would never get to play a game that good. In the Cat Dog movie, baby cat dog gets separated from its parents in a tornado. Broke my little kindergarten heart. I sobbed to the point of vomiting, and even then I knew it was ridiculous to cry over. This inherently made me even more sad. I cried at the end of The Return of the Jedi when I first watched it on VHS when I was about 8. I had to lock myself in the bathroom, I was crying so hard. When I was 4, I had a highlights calendar. I bawled my eyes out because my mom was taking it off the wall. Not because she was throwing away my calendar, but because she told me the year was changing from 1996 to 1997, and that was apparently too much for me. I also currently teach preschool. Punishment for my sins, apparently. I had a girl cry yesterday because one of her friends pointed at the girl's elbow and she didn't like it. Last week, a boy cried because his friend woke up his arms, and he had wanted them to be asleep. It's something new and bizarre every day. I was like 5 in the 90s watching all that on Nickelodeon. During the episode, someone knocked over one of the dancing lobsters. Just a guy in a lobster costume, and I felt so sorry for that poor bullied guy that I burst into tears. My mom ended up buying me a lobster Beanie Baby that day because I was absolutely inconsolable. Not sure I'd really call it dumb, but perhaps it is. I was probably 4 or 5 when the groundwork was set. My dad used to make my pancakes talk, and it would say things like, "You're hurting me," or, "I have a family, don't eat me." Made me cry when I was a kid. Fast forward. Last year, a couple of weeks after Christmas, my wife and I are driving home from her parents' house, and we see some unpurchased Christmas trees on the side of the road. My wife says, "Aw, some trees didn't get picked," without realizing what had begun to unfold in my brain. For a moment, my mind decides that these trees waited their whole lives to light up someone's living room on Christmas, and the pile of them there weren't good enough to be chosen for whatever reason. All I could feel was their collective sadness. I was holding back tears the rest of the way home. Sometime in grade school, my mom packed me a lunch with a bag of marshmallow Peeps inside. I guess I took too long to eat all of my lunch, so when I threw the bag away, I threw the rest of my lunch away with it, including the Peeps. Walking back home that day, right before I got to my house, I burst into tears because I realized I just threw away Peeps. I don't know, I was a weird kid who used to cry about every little thing back then, but this sticks out as just really dumb and weird. The Pixar movie Cars. I took my little cousin to see it when it first came out. Decent enough movie, and I was totally fine until it got to where Lightning McQueen came to an abrupt stop at the finish line of the last race to turn around and help the king make it to the end of his career's final race. I just lost it. Lightning McQueen dreamed his whole life of winning that trophy, and he threw it all away, not regretting a single moment, to help an otherwise stranger who was hurt. I was 15 at the time, surrounded by little kids, but just ugly, bawling my eyes out. I don't know what came over me, but I'll never forget that. I was very pregnant. We had gone out for ribs the night before. I didn't eat them all and took the rest home. I spent the next day daydreaming about eating those ribs when I got home. Found out they got left in my husband's car all night and day. I cried like a baby for an hour about those ribs. All the dead fish at the start of Saving Private Ryan. I was about 8 at the time. Not sure whether this is a sign of underlying mental illness or I was just a naive child. I dropped my last Hot Pocket on the floor.